So our next guest, I realized we've talked to him so many times, and early on in our conversations, I realized he was a fan of Bill Cosby albums and records, and specifically Buck Buck. And Mark Mix joins us. He's the president of the Right to Work Committee. You like that picture we sent you, huh?
Vic, where in the world did you find that? I'm surprised YouTube hasn't banned that for some reason. But anyway, that was amazing.
Yeah.
It's up on our stream now, Mark.
Everybody's looking at it. So
that little guy on top, that's the piece of paper.
He's a piece of paper on top of me. This is before Fat Albert came.
Yeah. Mothers pulling children off the street.
Right.
The whole bit.
I haven't listened to that in so long. But, Bill Cosby, George Carlin, I used to listen to their albums and memorize them and then do them for my friends. If we ever went out together, with Vic, do George Carlin, do Bill Cosby. And Buck Buck. So, in case you're not watching and just listening, Buck Buck is a game where one kid puts his hand against the wall or a fence, and then his friends, his team, all put their hands around each other's waist, making a line, and then the other team has to jump on top of them, and you have to see how many guys can jump on top of them before breaking, and then they would win the game if they broke the horse, so to speak, right? Because they used to call it Johnny on the Pony, too, or Buck Buck.
Yeah.
So
that's right. You got it.
We did that just for you, Mark Mix, just so you know.
Thank you. Well, that was very nice of you, and I'll have to go back and listen to it again. I think I still have that album. It was 1968 or something like that.
I know I was young, so I don't know.
Yeah, amen.
All right, so let's talk about Donald Trump's pick for Labor Secretary, Representative Lori Chavez-DeRemer. You are not happy with this pick. Tell us why.
Right, that's not funny. This is because she is one of 3 Republicans that co-sponsored a bill called the PRO Act. Vic, Ken, we've talked about this before. This is a bill that the federal government, if it passed, would repeal all of the right-to-work laws that have been passed by 26 states across the country. Secondarily, it basically eliminates the secret ballot election for union certification. It changes the definition of independent contractors and employees. It's got a lot of miserable things in it, and she's one of 3 that co-sponsored this bill, and that really is disqualifying in our view because of her position that says she believes workers should be forced to pay union dues or fees to get or keep a job in America.
So how did this happen? How did Donald Trump pick her? If you know all this off the top of your head.
Well, look, Sean O'Brien, the head of the Teamsters Union, spoke at the RNC, and somehow that speech, even though it was a socialist Marxist speech attacking the very substance of the American enterprise system, it has somehow turned out to be this relationship between Sean O'Brien and Donald Trump. And the story is that we're hearing is that he called Donald Trump and said this was the person he wanted, and if Trump would nominate her, this would prove that he was truly for working class people. The fact is, Vic, you know this. I mean, he didn't run on empowering union officials. He ran on empowering working Americans.
Right.
That includes union members. It includes non-union members. It was a simple campaign on policy issues where he said, secure the border, let's fight crime, let's reduce the size of government, let's reduce taxes, let's reduce regulation. And the American people said, we'll accept that. He didn't say, I think if you elect me, I want to force every worker in America to join unions and pay dues. He didn't say that. But yet, somehow, he's got to pay off the union officials because guess what? The Teamsters didn't endorse his opponent. That's the hook. They were so good that they just didn't endorse the Democrat opponent, Kamala Harris, even though 2 of the biggest Teamster local joint councils in America spent lots of money trying to defeat Donald Trump. As Sean O'Brien said, the Teamsters spent over $15 million supporting Democrats in just this last year. So anyway, it's a surprise to us.
Hey, Mark and Vic, I just want to let you guys know that listener Mike was actually the one who brought this to my attention. I was starting to read about it, Trump's nominees, and then Mike brought it to our attention, so I want to say thanks to Mike.
All right, so let's get back to Sean O'Brien because, Sean O'Brien and Sean Fain, right? They're presidents of 2 of the most powerful unions in this country. They both admitted that their rank and file overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump, yet Sean Fain decided to endorse Kamala Harris. Sean O'Brien didn't endorse anybody, which I think is, when the Teamsters president doesn't endorse you, you're a terrible Democratic president. But I think I don't know why they just don't get it. Are they so tied to that D that they have to do it that way?
Well, I think so. I mean, obviously, organized labor and the power that union officials have over workers and over certain industries, in this case, is a product of government action. So going all the way back to the 1930s, Vic, when they first decided, actually the 1920s, when unions lobbied for what's called the Railway Labor Act, they finally decided that, hey, this government thing's a lot easier than going out and selling a product. We can get the government to basically give us the privilege of forcing people to associate with us, and then to add insult to injury, force them to pay dues for forced association. That's a pretty good business model. And so from that time forward, union officials have had to play politics. They've had to be involved, whether it's in the state legislature, the school board, the county commission. They have to, because their power is a derivative of government action. Only 6% of the private sector workforce today is unionized or union members. And we know from a Gallup poll that about 65% have no interest at all in even contemplating unionization. So the idea that somehow Sean Fain, who, to your point, Vic, admitted that the great majority of his members were not going to be voting for Joe Biden when they endorsed him back in January, and Sean O'Brien, who said when they internally polled Teamster members, 62% of them said they were going to vote for Donald Trump. It's amazing that somehow, they earn some special privilege or special, nomination from President Trump.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, one of the most entertaining moments of the year this year was when Sean O'Brien was testifying in front of a Senate committee, and he and Senator Mark Wayne Miller don't get along. Mullen, I'm sorry. And they almost went at it. I mean, literally almost went at it. And I know that Sean O'Brien thinks he's a tough guy, but Mark Wayne Mullen is like a martial arts expert, know, and they're like, oh yeah, let's go at it. And then Bernie Sanders is the chairman of the committee. Stop it. You're a U.S. Senator. Stop that right now. And it was just one of the most entertaining moments of the year.
Yeah. Well, I testified in the first hearing where round one occurred, where they actually started jawing with each other, and they didn't go. I was at the table. I was between Sean O'Brien and Mark Wayne Mullen.
Wow.
And there were a couple of Teamster guys sitting behind him, and I was ready to bail out. Dick, look, I'm the mosquito in Buck Buck. I'm the piece of paper in Buck Buck. That's me.
So funny. So
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, we're talking to Mark Mex, president of the Right to Work Committee. Why is it? Because when Democrats or anybody says something, you have to try to say, why are they saying that? What is with the hatred for right to work? What's the problem?
Well, it forces union officials to go back out and sell a product to the American worker. And union officials have created a narrative that said somehow if you're free to choose whether or not you want to support us, that's somehow anti-union. It's not anti-union. The union density in several right-to-work states is greater than it is in non-right-to-work states, and that's because union officials kind of pull their reins in a little bit when they start taking these radical views, because they know that workers can say, you know what, I don't appreciate that, I don't agree with that, so I'm going to withhold my financial support. It's really, really simple, and like I said, no right to work law stops anyone from joining a union, from paying their entire paycheck to a union if they choose to do so. It just gives the individual worker the freedom. So the narrative about right to work is somehow it's going to destroy everything, that you'll have constant halitosis, school roofs will buckle, potholes will appear in the road. But the bottom line is about individual freedom and individual liberty. And that is offensive to guys like Sean O'Brien and Sean Fain and Randy Weingarten, and it appears to be offensive to Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri as well. He's the guy that says, I would never impose right to work on anyone, and yet he's now said that this Lori Chavez-DeRemer is a great nominee. In fact, she wants to impose unionization. Get this, Vic, get this, Ken. She co-sponsored a bill that would allow the federal government to impose unionization on all government employees at the state level. Literally impose unionization on every employee at the state level. Josh Hawley thinks that's just fine. He tells everyone to relax. It's all going to be okay.
That just sounds so counter to what the American people would want, and it just surprises me that Donald Trump would nominate somebody like that. It just, like Vic said, why would he do that?
Yeah. I can't explain it. That's inexplicable. Donald Trump, if anyone can explain Donald Trump, I'm interested to hear that. That is, Vic, maybe you have a hypothesis about this. I don't know. But he's his own man, and I think he wants to support working Americans. He believes he connected with ordinary people, ordinary working Americans, and somehow, the demographic designation now is different between working people and union people. they divide these people. We're all the same. We're all working class. We're all working people. And we believed in the policies that Donald Trump articulated on the campaign trail. That's why people voted for him, not because he's doing favors for Sean O'Brien, or Sean O'Brien non-endorsement of him caused working men and women to say, yeah, we're for Donald Trump now.
And when I say it's counter to what American people in general think, is because, I think that the American people want a choice. Give both, give the option of both and let them choose,
That makes perfect sense, Ken, but that's the problem. It makes perfect sense. So, yeah.
I just can't believe how many occupations in this country are unionized, If you go to the supermarket, almost everybody who works there is in the union, right? I remember we were doing, when I was doing the morning show at the River, we had there were 3 big supermarkets here in St. Louis, Mark. They were all on strike, and we played little games, to do with it. So we played a game called "Is There a Striker Named Stanley?" And we sent Jake out in the picket line to find some. And if we found one named Stanley, he won a prize or something stupid. And then it was fall when this happened, and we said, let's do some drive-by leafings, just for somebody to rake their leaves and put them in a bag and do it for them for nothing just because we like them. And so we found a bagger from the grocery store who was on strike. That's what he does, right? He bags things, right?
Right.
And I don't know, it was just fun. But I can't believe how many occupations in this country nurses are even unionized.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're actually ended up on college campuses now. You got a basketball team at Dartmouth University that's now unionized. I don't know how that's going to play out, whether they can decide not to play a game or show up for the jump ball at the beginning of the first, the whistle. But we've got graduate assistants across the country. In fact, half of the United Auto Workers Union members in this country, Vic, Ken, are basically graduate students in the California school system. There are as many graduate students and higher education students that are UAW members, and there are actually auto workers in the automotive business now.
Wow.
It's just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. And I know I've said this before, Mark. The way that I found out about Right to Work was that the Right to Work supports a union member, doesn't support the union member to have their money go to people who support issues that they don't agree with. And I was like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. And somehow, I don't know.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. That's one of the injustices of forced unionism, is the forced political conformity that comes with it. Because even though we won a Supreme Court case in 1988, we litigated a case called Beck versus Communication Workers of America that basically was predicated on that very point, Vic, that this guy, a telephone lineman for the Bell Atlantic phone system, was forced to support candidates and ideas that he didn't want. He brought it up to the union and said, too bad, if you don't pay, you don't work. We took him all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. He got his half hour of oral arguments, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, well, he's right. Harry Beck is right. We shouldn't be allowing a private organization to take money from someone as a condition of their employment and using it for things that are outside the bargaining unit, outside of everything that the union claims they're doing, and are purely political in nature. Unfortunately, what he had to do in order to exercise that right to protect his political rights, he had to give up his workplace rights, because in order to protect his political rights, he had to resign from the union. If he resigns from the union, he can't vote on the contract that governs the conditions of employment. He can't reform the union from the inside by running for office. He can't vote on anything that has to do with the union. He can't even go to the union hall for the beer blast. So it was a Hobson's choice for many workers. Either you keep your workplace rights and give up your political rights, or keep your political rights and give up your workplace rights. That's not a solution. The solution is take away the forced financial conformity that comes from the 1935 law and let the workers choose, as Ken said. Let them choose. If they want to support the union, they can. Nothing stops anyone from paying the union or associating with the union in any way, shape, or form. In fact, the federal law protects it.
And as a private citizen, this is just an example, but I don't subscribe to AARP. It's AMAC, because AARP has far left lobbyists, right? And so I just choose not to give my money there. And that's kind of the same thing.
It's very related. I think it's very related.
Yeah. Well, it is. And, the unions always use the argument and say, well, you have to pay your taxes. You can't not pay your tax. Well, that's government. And we, as citizens of the United States of America, following the Constitution, have given certain rights to government. The right of force, limited force, albeit, hopefully, but they are the one institution that can say, yeah, there's this compulsion, there's this force. private organizations don't deserve that. They shouldn't have it. And frankly, they shouldn't want it, because if they're really selling something that people want, people will buy it. What is the movie that Build It and They Will Come? I mean, it just makes sense. Sell a product, focus on the shop floor, focus on the workplace, focus on the people you're representing, get out of the political business and go forward. And people will gladly support you.
It's funny that I always try to be funny. I don't know whether I always succeed or not, but I try to always be funny. And whenever I'm not getting my way, I always say I'm going to file a grievance with the union. Right. Even if it's something stupid, like, the snack area doesn't have peanuts. Well, I'm going to file a grievance with the union. Right. Because it's almost that ridiculous, right?
Well, that's right. And interesting enough about the whole grievance process, that's a whole other issue. And you'll have to come up with another cartoon to draw me back there. But the whole grievance procedure, the union has total control of the grievance procedure. They can decide whether or not a grievance goes forward, goes to the next stage. And if you're not a union member, well, they'll say, well, we don't think that grievance is worthy of going forward. And frankly, Vic, again, any grievance that's brought in a workplace is actually a dispute about what the contract says. So if an employer decides to say, oh, Vic's right, the candy machine needs to be updated, we're going to put healthy snacks in there, all of a sudden the union files an unfair labor practice charge against your boss because it's saying you didn't negotiate with us about that. And candy machines are part of the contract. And if you don't negotiate with us about it, you can't have it.
Wow.
And that's the problem. The problem.
Next time we talk, Mark, I want to talk more about unions having a mob relationship. And also, I'm going to listen to Buck, and we'll talk about that. You enjoyed that picture he put up there for you, right? You liked it.
I loved it. Thank you. I know you're thinking about me.
Always, Mark. Always. Mark Mix, president of the Right to Work Committee. We'll talk next time.